morning, Roxy Soxy.
Good morning, Tantam, or should I say good evening?
And good night. It is actually like a midnight over here. My husband's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I am working, my friend. This is what it takes to be successful.
I mean, how are we even awake now? We're usually in bed at this time.
It's 8 o'clock your time? Like, what the hell? What time did you go to bed?
I have turned over a new leaf. Let me tell you something. There's something about going to bed at 9 p.m.
You just do that to get rid of your husband?
Yeah. I'm like, bye, David.
Yeah, you're like, mommy's getting some beauty sleep, and then you're up to like 2 o'clock watching like
Netflix on my phone. I'm like,
yeah. And he's like, hey, darling, do you want a little bit of sexy time? And you're like, you're just pretending. I know you're Jim.
You know how I roll.
I know. It's so funny. My husband gets so tired. I don't know if I told you this, but like, he will literally be in the middle of a conversation with me and fall asleep in the middle of it. I get so offended. I've actually stopped getting offended. But we would be like the other day, I was like, can I tell you something that like means a lot to me? And, you know, I was really thinking about the meaning of life. And then I turn over and he's like,
oh,
I'm like so mad. And I'm like, well, F you, not telling you about what the meaning of life is. You'll have to figure it out yourself.
I love it. Do you remember the time you told me you guys were on a date in LA and he fell asleep at the bar? Like,
okay, but to be fair, because people are like, divorce him. To be fair, we had just had a baby. We were 6 weeks in and we had not slept for 6 weeks. But I was also extremely sensitive because I thought like, you know, I obviously just had a baby and we're going to talk to our next guest about body image too, because I was just had such a self-loathing after I had the baby in my body. And I felt like no one loved me, especially my husband. And then he falls fucking asleep at the table. So I'm like, of course you don't love me. I actually ran out of the restaurant, Roxy, and left him sleeping at the table.
Did he come home, like roll him at 3 a.m.? Like,
no, I wanted him to. I was like a child. I went into the parking lot and I made him find me. He just was like, this is a bad dream. He woke up. He didn't even know where he was.
He's like drooling on the bar. Like,
yeah. Poor guy.
I know.
Okay, I think we should stop with our stories because our next guest, I'm sure, needs to explain so much more about life than we do.
I mean, she kind of knows what's up. I mean, she is a powerhouse. You know, she is a self-love influencer. We talk a lot about self-love on this podcast and the importance of it. And she's just so true to herself and her brand. And when you look at her social media, you just, I feel like so uplifted. You know, I feel like she's so truthful. She tells truth and like, she's
you
so
feel
authentic.
seen, right?
Yes. You feel seen and you
safe.
Feel safe. Exactly. Because you know that she is representing most women, like most, like we all have, you know, we're all the same like this. And I just love that she's so who she is, you know, and she's so honest about who she is. So we are excited to welcome Danae Mercer to the show today. Woo!
She lives in Dubai.
Right?
Yeah. Well, gosh, thank you. Yes, I live in Dubai, and thank you so much for having me. That was quite a beautiful introduction. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
We aim to please.
Yes. We do. So how is it in Dubai? Like, tell us what's the latest? What's going on? Are you guys COVID lockdown or are you?
No, Dubai, when COVID started, they went really intense. Like for 6 weeks, we had to have a permit to leave the house. It was pretty strong. But now they have the second highest rate of vaccination of anywhere else in the world. Israel's first, Dubai second. So it's incredible. So everything's pretty open. Like they're really taking that proactive herd immunity process very seriously.
And I do feel that if, you know, I say this to you, Roxy, I feel if we had just for a month not left the house just for 1 month and like made sure that we had our groceries. And yes, there's certain jobs that obviously have to go in, like specific essential workers and doctors. But if we were very, very, very strict in those first month or 2 months, I feel like it would be completely different in the States right now.
Yeah. I mean, I think for sure, especially that critical like point where it first started, you know, But I think things kind of got out of hand, and, it's, one state does something different than the other, and it's all in close proximity. So it's hard to keep it under control if not everybody's on the same page,
Well, so tell us about your Instagram, because I remember, I think you grew because people like me would find you on their, For You pages, and your posts would go viral because they weren't necessarily what we were used to seeing on social media. Your social media is very honest about body image and about, taking that lid off the perfect social media photo and the truth behind it. And for someone like me who's had eating disorders and who's had distorted eating, who has had a lot of issues with self-loathing and body confidence, when I saw your social media page, it made me feel, like I said to Roxy, safe and seen, but also normal. It also normalized bodies. And I think that's something that we need to start doing. And I think you're one of the pioneers to do that.
Oh, well, thank you. I guess my goal is to make women and girls feel safe and seen. Like, I think as someone who has like you, I've gone through my own eating disorder journey, and just the way my life has been, I think there's so much of me that has really just wanted to feel seen, and then not change, not like forced to be someone I'm not, but safe and seen. And so that's a really beautiful way of kind of describing what the goal is of my page. And yeah.
Yeah. I thought it was really interesting too, as I was looking at your photos, I'm like, God, this girl is so brave. Like you are so brave. And it's like, you're not, it almost feels like you really are not even, you don't give a shit about like what all this other, stuff is, like the filters, and like, you see other people's pages where you get, you almost feel like you're competing, they make you insecure. And like, so what, like, was there a point where you just said, like, did you ever first start using filters and doing that whole thing? And was there a moment where you were like, okay, I'm giving this all up. Like, I'm not going to use these filters. Like, was there like a clear point of change for you in that way, or were you always sort of not doing it?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think for me, like, first, I don't feel very brave, if that makes sense. Like, I think when people meet me in real life, they expect this like really dominant personality who's like, heck yes, girl, like you do this. And that's not me. Like, I'm that kind of awkward girl in the corner with a book, like that's always been me. But I think the stuff I talk about on my Instagram, I reached a point where I couldn't not talk about it. Like, when I started doing social media, it was more, I guess, your traditional like Fitspo and luxury travel and that sort of stuff. And, I was working as an editor in the region at the time, first for a luxury travel publication, and then as editor of Women's Health Middle East. And I guess my social media was what I thought I should be doing. It wasn't really me. Like, I felt very disconnected. I felt very like I was just doing what I thought I had to. And then I think I just reached a point in April 2019 where I'd taken some photos on the beach, and you could see my cellulite on my bum. And this was something like deep in myself I was so incredibly ashamed of and embarrassed by. And I think I just reached a point where I was like, I'm tired of feeling shame around my body. I'm tired of hiding myself. I just, like you were saying, I just want to be seen. And especially the region I'm based in, that I knew that being seen would impact my work. I knew being seen would, that just isn't done here, especially. But I did my first kind of self-love post, April 2019. And even as I was posting it, I was like messaging one of my best friends. I was like, should I do this? This is really scary. Should I do this? I don't know if I could do this. And she was like, yes, girl. Yes. She's a dominant personality. Yes. And yeah, I haven't looked back, I guess.
Wow.
I find it so crazy that normalizing bodies is such a thing. You know, my job is an actress first and foremost, and they cover you up in certain scenes, you know, or you ask to be covered up. I don't really know which came first. If you feel like your body doesn't look the perfect way that it should on camera. You know, I was watching Firefly, is that the one with Katherine Heigl? And she had this sex scene, and I don't know if it was her choice or the director's choice, but she's got, you know, one new baby and 2 adopted children, 3 kids. And you could tell that she was hiding her hips or her stomach or her lower stomach. And they even shot her in a way that was more flattering. And like, when did it become the narrative that the only thing that was attractive or is attractive is this ideal, beautiful, scar-free, cellulite-free, smooth body? Like, when did this begin? Why have we now only shown a certain type of body that it's almost shocking to show the other? Just like you did, you said, oh my goodness, I don't know if I want to show my body with cellulite, because you were so afraid of showing people what a normal body is. And it's like, when I go through your Instagram, I'm like, why is this even something? Why do we even need to talk about it? But of course we do, because we're living in La La Land, right?
It's really interesting to hear you talk about how they shoot actors and actresses, because that's something I think most of us don't realize, we don't think about. And that's, of course it happens. That's really, really fascinating to hear you say. And I think if you look at any time in history, forever, there have always been beauty ideals. Like, that's human nature. We go for what's beautiful, and what's beautiful is always changing and constantly fluctuating. I think what's tricky now is with social media, it's not just some model or some actress that we see as beautiful. It is like the girl next door and the other one and the other one and the other one. And then we look at ourselves in the mirror and we think, well, but what about, you know, why do I have this and they don't? Why do I have this and they don't? And that can be really difficult mentally.
You know,
and who chooses what's beautiful, right? Who chooses what's beautiful?
You know, I think don't you think it's sort of like, I mean, a lot of times it is the men on top, right? It's like the men who sort of control the media and control like what comes out and what we see. And it's still like a good old boys club a lot of the time.
I think that's still very much an element. But again, I do think social media is changing that too. Like, if you look over at TikTok, which is just this fascinating case study of human nature in real time, right? Like, you have trends that are tangibly emerging and changing, and we can watch it. And it's driven by these teenagers who are on their phones. Things like, you know, the side part is not cool now. It is the middle part. That. And yeah,
I guess
I'm using that emoji, by the way. The emoji with the tears, smile laugh is not in. I'm like, I will not go that far. I might not do the side part, but I am doing that emoji.
Yeah. Things like this, right? Or you could see that eye bags are becoming cooler. They're cooler now. And there was like a whole stage where makeup artists were deliberately drawing on eye bags or the freckles or the blush on the nose and on your cheeks instead of contour and highlighting. So I wouldn't say beauty is, maybe traditionally it was very much top down, but now it's, I would say, way more complex than that. Like this real time interaction.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I'm wondering too, like for your social media, because, you know, you started out sort of doing what a lot of people were doing, which is kind of trying to put your best face forward and showing your highlight reel, that when you did switch it up and you became much more honest and, you know, open about who you are and like the way that all of our bodies really look, what was the reaction from your audience? Was everybody supportive, or what was that like?
Well, okay. So I think there were two reactions, mainly. The first was this beautiful community of people who popped out and were like, hey, I have that too. Or, oh, I didn't realize that girls who look like you also look like me. Like, I didn't know that. And so there was this real beautiful kind of strong female empowering community. And I would say that's what's really, really grown and taken off. And then there were, I mean, even some of my best friends here, like one of them told me the other day that for a while she muted my account because she didn't want to see that. Like she would prefer to see very traditional beauty. And I think there were quite a few people in my real life, especially, who were like, you shouldn't do this. You're not going to get brand work. And are you sure? Like, you're not going to be invited to events. And like, do you really want people to see that about you? You know, it was navigating more of, which I think those comments came from a place of love, you know, and trying to protect me and making sure that I knew what I was, I guess, getting myself into. But I have no regrets.
I just can't believe that we see people getting shot. We see people in movies getting their heads chopped off. We see people being like having fights on all these websites. And yet you see cellulite and people are afraid to show that. I mean, how far off have we become as human beings? Like, we're the most incredible species, and like what are we doing, you know? And it's interesting that you talked about this on your Instagram, and it happened to me too. Recently, I put a picture of me as a 13-year-old. I was very overweight. I was 250 pounds when I was like 13 years old, 14 years old. And I put a picture of me in a bathtub, and I was covering myself. You couldn't see anything. And you could see my rolls, and you could see, you know, my double chin. And within 30 minutes, I would say that post was taken down. There was no nudity at all. It was just under my arms. And someone said to me, and I didn't think about this at the time, they said, the reason it was taken down, I promise you, is because of your size. People would not have flagged it if you were like a younger girl who looked really skinny, and I was talking about an eating disorder, let's say, like, oh, look at this picture of me, I had anorexia. People would probably say, oh, that's really sad. I'm so glad whatever they're going to say. But because I was an overweight girl and it was just something they didn't want to look at, that post was taken down within 30 minutes. And you said that your TikTok, on one of your posts, that your TikTok has been reported many times for violations. A lot of your videos have been taken down. And how you said the words, how do we change the conversation if we're not allowed to speak? And I think that is such an important message. How can we change people's opinions if your body is not even allowed to be shown? And when that photo got taken down, I went down to the rabbit hole, and I saw many girls with their vaginas hanging out. And I'm saying vaginas hanging out because there were like, you could see everything, you know, their butts in the air, their legs, everything. And those accounts are still okay because no one is flagging them, and they're flagging accounts like yours more than mine. But when I posted that, they're flagging mine. And I just think enough is enough.
I'm so sorry that happened to you. I think there's a real tension at the moment between these big platforms, which are our new media, right? Like, this is where we go for news. This is where we go for conversations. So there's a real tension between these big platforms and how they police different bodies. And on Instagram, especially, there's been a group of women. There's one named Curvy Naomi. There's some others who have really actively taken a stand against Instagram policing curvier bodies, because they do that at a far higher rate than they do slimmer bodies. And then my experience over on TikTok is, it's my content keeps getting flagged and taken down because it's showing cellulite, it's showing stretch marks, and it is the most frustrating and upsetting thing, because part of me, like, you know, I'm 34 years old. I have never been a dancer. Like, TikTok we are not a natural fit, but it is I think it's the fastest growing platform in the world. It's where all like the girls who maybe need to hear, like, I think of myself at 13, right? Or 14, 15, when I was going through puberty, and maybe some of what I talk about now would have helped me. And we also know that as you're going through puberty, it's one of the highest times in your life for eating disorder development. So I really believe in talking about the things I talk about over on that platform, but my videos get taken down. And like you were saying, like, you just have to look at the bikini hashtag or the big bank hashtag, and you're like, oh, okay, it's not because I'm showing my bum, because that's okay.
Right.
But is it because my bum has dimples? Is that the issue here?
Actually truly shocking.
It's truly shocking. You're right. And it's not right, because like you're saying, you're cutting the conversation off. And there are people, you know, wherever they may be, that might need to hear this, you know, that might stop them from hurting themselves or hurting somebody else, you know, and it's really important to have that free flowing conversation. But I wanted to take it back a little bit too, because you're very open and honest on your social media about having an eating disorder. So, and I know Tammin and I talk about this too on the show a lot, because Tammin, as she mentioned before, had an eating disorder. I definitely had disordered eating growing up. I would say 90% of my friends had some form of, you know, disordered eating or eating disorder, something. So can you kind of just take us through that, like what that was like for you and how you sort of got through it? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I guess, like I mentioned about being 13, I've always been aware of my body. And I think it's always been a bit of a coping mechanism for me. We moved a lot. I had a pretty unstable childhood, and my mom started getting sick when I was 13. And then she was sick for the next 6 years before she finally passed away. So after her death is where I started to just really control my food. And, you know, it started with, like, I think Atkins was really big at the time. So I was like, okay, well, carbs are bad, but then, sugar is bad. So I shouldn't have bananas because those have sugar. And like, oh, but fat is bad, because at that time, fat was still bad. Now it's trendy again, but fat was bad then. So I started to just massively cut back food. And it felt at a time in my life when everything was out of control and everything was falling apart. And, you know, my family was falling apart. My, like, academics were really intense. I was doing all this research. I was kind of definitely an overachiever. So everything just got, and I'd broken up with, like, my first ever love, who broke up with me on the day my mom died. So it was all just, like, imploding. It was this really horrible time. And it felt like controlling food was something I was really good at, and being skinny, I was great at. And it was like, okay, I can't navigate all this, but, like, look, I can win this, and this is okay. And it was over Christmas break. It got really bad, and I was restricting massively. And at the time, Tumblr was really big, and there were a lot of pro-Anna sites on Tumblr, which is why I think I'm so passionate about some of the stuff I see happening on TikTok. But the pro-Anna communities, which are pro anorexia, they really fueled this kind of sick space that I had stepped into, where it was normal, and I was accepted, and I was winning, and, like, look, these girls are struggling even at this, and I'm better, and it's okay, and I'm doing okay. And it was in January when basically I'd gone for a scholarship, because I was, again, the girl with the books, right? So and a couple of the professors who hadn't seen me for, 6 weeks or whatever the holidays were, they saw me, and I just lost so much weight. I looked very sick, very sick. I was very sick. And fortunately, they stepped in and kind of pulled me aside that day and had a really honest conversation with me. And they were like, you need help, and we will help you. Like, we will take you to the nurse's office. We will take you to your therapy, but you need help. And my Creighton University, my university, were incredible. They just swooped in. And I mean, honestly, I would say they probably saved my life, because eating disorders are the deadliest mental illness. And for a year, they provided medical care. So I would see a doctor or a nurse, I had therapy, and I had a nutritionist, and they provided that all entirely free, which is, as someone dealing with everything I was dealing with, I couldn't have afforded to pay for any of that. So, and it was because of them that I was able to, I guess, recover in the way I did.
Yeah. Talking about eating disorders, I just decided one day that I was sick of feeling sick. And it just like never, it's weird because I say it and it never came back, but
it never goes away 100%.
It never really, I wouldn't say, I don't really think of food now as the devil or as a danger for me. But when I eat, I do think, oh, will that make me feel good? Will that make me feel tired? Or will that make me feel, I still have a connection to like how food will make me feel. And I wonder, like, do you truly love and accept your body, or because of everything you've been through, just like I've been through too, Roxy's been through too, will there always be a little bird on your shoulder that's like, you're not good enough, you're not skinny enough, you've got too much cellulite, that you have to fight daily? Or are now you just happy with who you are?
Oh gosh, I wish it was, oh yes, 1,000% always happy with who I am, but I'm not. Like, I think being a woman, right, whether you've had an eating disorder or not, it is a constant battle every morning when you wake up and you look in that mirror, and it is, what is my relationship with my body today? What is my relationship with my personality, with who I am? Like, how do I feel about this today? And I think, even like yesterday, it's funny you ask, yesterday I would say it's like a wobbly day where I wasn't feeling great in my skin, and I saw my cellulite, and instead of being like, heck yes, I was like, ooh, is that okay? And I think what I've learned is that it's okay if I don't love myself every day, but I can respect myself and I can honor it, and I can ignore any thought that creeps in and is like, this cellulite or this body change means you're a failure. Like, this means you are bad. And like, no, it doesn't. It means I'm a creature living in a body that changes, and this body lets me move, and this body makes me feel good, and it makes me feel strong. So instead of kind of self-love, I think I'm really focusing on and thankful for like self-respect, like respecting what I can do instead of just hoping that every day it's sunshine and rainbows.
What's interesting though? I feel like it never, like, there's always sort of that voice, that is in the back of the head that's always there. And, definitely different days are different, so some days are better than others. And some days I'm better at like kind of telling it to fuck off. And then other days, it's like a louder voice, but I'm thankful that I'm at least able to kind of navigate some of those days, pretty okay. But for a lot of other people, it's not that easy. It's like, it's a real struggle. And I just wonder, like, what would you say to those people that kind of feel so trapped in that cycle, in that sort of mental cycle of just tearing themselves down and like, hearing that voice a little too loud?
Yeah, I think you're right. It can be a real struggle, and it can be a cycle as well, right? Because once you're in that space and you think, well, my body isn't good enough, so I feel bad. But if I fix my body, I'll feel better. If I fix my body, I will find that love of my life. I'll get that perfect job. If I fix my body, everything will be okay. And so you try, and maybe you restrict really strongly, and then you binge, because that is, the body wants balance. The body needs food. Or, maybe you are doing other disordered things with food, and it becomes this real guilt cycle. And so you feel worse, but you're like, okay, but if I fix my body, it'll be better. And so it's a really dangerous place to get into, and a very hard one to get out of. I would say if you can, I would 1,000% recommend therapy. I know it's not accessible for everyone, but if that's an option, like, that is one of the greatest things we can do for ourselves. There's no shame in it. There's only power in the same way you would go to a personal trainer if you want to get fitter. Why wouldn't we go to a brain doctor just to have a chat? So I'd say therapy really helps. For me, sport really helps as well. Like a sport that has nothing to do with shrinking or changing my body, but instead just makes me feel good. So if I'm having a wobbly day, maybe I'll go and I'll lift some weights, and I like these little puppies are never going to be ginormous, but I'm sat there with my like 3 kg like dumbbell and I'm like, yes, like, I'm a powerhouse. And the gym bros, I'm like, look at these muscles, and it makes me feel really good. And then I'd also really recommend like take some time and journal or meditate. And I was always someone I was like, well, meditating's flu. Journaling is a waste of my time. Like, this is just, I don't have time for that. But we will never be happy with what's going on with our bodies until we tune into like, what is really going on? Like, is there something in our life? Is it about our body, or is it about like, I'm worried no one will love me, or I feel really trapped right now and I don't know what to do, but this seems like something I can control. So maybe that's why I'm obsessing about it. Like, it's often when we deal with our bodies, like I've spoken to so many psychologists and stuff just as a journalist, and what they say again and again is like, when we start obsessing with our bodies, it's often to do with our external environment, what's happening in our life. And it can be hard to figure that out. So if we just take some time and like write those thoughts down, write a letter to ourselves, like it can help us tune into this so that we can deal with all of this.
I totally believe that the first step is awareness. And if you don't have awareness, then you can never change. If you can't see the thought that's coming in and go, oh, that's a negative thought, that's a black and white thinking, that's good, catastrophic thinking, then you can never change. I think bodies really, our mentality surrounding bodies gets really terrible when you're a woman. I feel when you're a woman after you've given birth, because it's almost like your body's taken such a massive beating. And there's a few reasons why I think your mentality around it is terrible. Sorry, it's late here. One is because we don't talk about it. I think women postpartum don't talk about the fact that your body will never look the same. I don't care if you completely bounce back, either your vagina or your stomach or your scar, there'll be something different about it. Number 2, we don't ever have the time to get our bodies back. Not bodies back, but like strengthen our bodies. We don't ever have the time to do that because we have a newborn. It's not we've now become a body that we don't recognize overnight. And I think women who are in postpartum and have had kids, I think it's really difficult for them, and I feel really sorry for women like, Roxy and I who've just had babies, because it's like you want your body back. You do. You want your old body back, and you feel so ashamed and vulnerable to say it out loud. But I know I do. I was so horrible to my old body, and now I'm like, I'm so sorry. I should have been much nicer to you, because I want it back, and it's hard to even say that out loud.
Well, what's also so hard is that the images that we see, because, okay, we pay attention to pop culture. We watch movie, TV, everything that we see. And the reality is not the same as the perception. I mean, when you see an actress in Hollywood, a lot of the time they go and have a baby, and then 6 weeks later, they're back to size 00. And that just is not the reality. That is not what happens. But I think as long as we still keep being fed images like that and seeing things like that, we're always going to feel like that. We're always going to feel like we're ashamed, or, we should be looking this way 6 weeks after having a baby, or this and that.
Well, I think it's very powerful to hear you guys talk about that experience. I mean, I personally haven't had children yet. It's something I would like one day, but I can imagine, like, I think for many women, it's a very difficult time, a very, very difficult time. And I do think also it's a time where you have to be careful with disordered eating or those thoughts, because your body's changing. There's a really incredible kind of self-love activist I follow on Instagram. Her handle's The Bird's Papaya. Her name's Sarah.
She's been on our show before.
Oh,
we love her. Sarah.
Oh yeah.
She's great.
Yeah, she's wonderful. And I, as someone who hopes to have children one day, it's been very empowering to watch her journey through. She's just given birth, and to watch how she talks about her body and how she talks about, like, here's my body after birth. You don't see this usually. You only see the big, you know, beautiful glowing bump. And then you see everyone super toned and tight again. Mm-hmm. But here's what my body, like here, you still have a bump after birth, mm-hmm. which is like, again, something like one of my friends here gave birth, and she spoke about her like post birth bump. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know that, right? I was like, wait, as a 30-year-old woman, I had no idea that your body I just thought you give the baby and then it goes right back in.
And you're in diapers, by the way, for the first 6 weeks. No one tells you about the diapers.
No, and you wear your maternity jeans for at least like 4 months after you.
Are you joking? At least I'm still in my maternity jeans, Roxy. She's 2.
See, I love hearing women talk about these things because it's like I know it's different, but it's kind of like periods, right? Like periods. There's so much shame and taboo around
I talk about them all the time.
Mm-hmm. Good. Because so many women, we grow up ignorant. We grow up ignorant. We don't understand what's going on. We are told it's shameful. And I feel like that conversation happens a lot around post-pregnancy as well, right? It's like, you would be the one equipped to speak about the shame and the difficulties, but I know I'm just thankful to hear people talking about it.
Mm-hmm. My second baby, I felt completely different because I've been through the first one, but the first one was like a truck had gone through my entire life. And I make it like my mission to try, and you don't want to give people advice when they're first pregnant because they're like, they have no idea that they're about to go into a shitstorm. But you want to like lightly say things like, give yourself grace. And if your body changes, just know that it's okay and take care of yourself as well. Because, you know, you were born too. You're born as you have just been born a mother. You know, you try to say those things, but I was just completely shell-shocked. I went to the hospital. I think I told you this, Roxy, with lingerie in my bag. I got my hair done. I got my vagina waxed because I was like, that has to look pretty. Like, who cares? Jesus, you're having a baby. Wanted that to look real pretty. I had my toes done. I had my fingers done. I was like ready for those beautiful pictures of like pushing the baby out and then glowing with my lashes and like, oh my God, newborn baby. I was in a diaper. I had like, looked like my blood had all burst in my face. I was all puffy like a puffer fish from all the drugs. It was like the most unattractive.
You're constipated.
I'm constipated. I have this whole double chin. I like still look at the picture now and I'm like thinking, could my husband not have gotten a better picture of me? But then I was like, he probably couldn't have gotten a better picture of me. And I just am like shell shocked that is not what we see. Even the home births, you see like this baby popping out and the mother's like head is up and she looks like a little wet and she's crying and it still looks very beautiful. You know, it doesn't look like it really is.
Right. Oh, okay. Just so you know, Danae.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, all right then.
But the diapers are good. You know, I'm like, pack some diapers, like they give you these gauze underwear that now I'm starting to see on social media and a pad that is literally the size of your entire body. You're like, what is that for? And then you say you don't talk about periods. You bleed for 6 weeks straight. No one tells you that.
No one tells you.
6 weeks of bleeding. You're even just like, how does
even with C-sections, you bleed
for 6 weeks.
Yep.
So after you bleed for 6 weeks, periods are like,
that's like child's play now.
Yeah. That's like a little cut on the finger.
When like because I've been watching this with Sarah and my friend had it too. When like your ducts get clogged, so your nipples get clogged. I'm like, I didn't know they could clog. How can they clog?
They're so painful. And you think like, I remember saying to my husband, I'm not touching my boob like while we're doing this. I remember telling him like, I think I have tumors in my breasts because they're just all of a sudden they're just full lumps all over your breast. And I'm like, do you think I just overnight got all these tumors? I was like, no. And then you have to massage the milk that gets stuck that has to come out. It's very painful.
Very painful. Yeah. It's not all fun and games.
But yay for kids. But yay for getting pregnant.
You know, I thought it was really interesting what you said about periods too, because Tammy and I were actually talking about periods not too long ago. And it's like there's still such a taboo about talking about a woman's menstrual cycle. And I'm like, when is this conversation going to change? Why are we made to feel dirty because we have periods? you know?
Oh God. Well, exactly. And it's something I feel pretty strongly about talking about, because especially in the disordered eating disorder, athletic space, so many girls and women lose their periods, you know, with overexercising, under eating, under fueling your body. And I, as someone who I didn't have a period for years, first because of my eating disorder, then because of sport, and then because I was on a certain type of hormonal birth control. And now, like, my period is so regular that this little app tells me, it's like, today you're probably ovulating. You can probably feel it. And then it's like, today, you know, your period starts. And I'm like, I know, I can tell what's going on in my body because I have started to really tune in. I've used technology to help me understand and learn. And it is the most empowering thing, but also it's kind of, I know this is a little hippy dippy, but it like makes me feel connected to something outside of myself, to something that like ties together so many people all around the world. And I'm like, there's power in this. Like, why don't we learn about this? Why don't we understand it? It's incredible. It's not shameful. It's not embarrassing. Just because it's not masculine doesn't mean it should be hidden.
Right. That's exactly a good point. I feel like that is a lot of the argument, you know, because it's not like maybe something that men go through. So it's kind of like unknown, you know, a little bit, and it's dirty and it's all the things. Don't you think, Tammin?
Yeah, it's interesting because with Phoenix, like I'm on my period right now. Good conversation, Deb.
Perfect.
I actually remember maybe later when I was a little older. I don't actually ever remember my mom having her period. Obviously she did. Phoenix walks in all the time, my oldest daughter, and she's like, what's going on? I'm like, I have my period, and like, you know, there's blood and this is what happens. And she's like, oh, okay. Like in the beginning she was like, does it hurt? And I'm like, no, it doesn't hurt. And so now hopefully when she gets her period, it's not going to be, you know, when I got my period, I felt so ashamed. I hid it for the longest time. I remember I cried. I was so afraid that it can't come. And I think by having the conversation with our girls younger, and her knowing now that, every month my mom is kind of a bitch and then gets her period. Don't be near mom for 3 days. Everyone leaves the house. No, but now she'll understand that it's not something that you should be ashamed of. And it's all these things that we're talking about. Just when you really think about it and you meditate on it, it's insane that women who are born to bleed every month, it's still a thing to like not tell the CVS person who's like picking up the DoorDash person, like you feel so embarrassed that he's picking up pads for you. I mean, like when you meditate on it, I just think that these, even that we're having these conversations, are just wild and crazy. Like, who cares, right? Who cares that we have a period? Who cares that we bleed? Like, what's the big old deal? Who cares that we have cellulite? Like, who cares that we have wrinkles and we're getting older? Like, fuck, there's so many things in the world that we should be paying attention to and should be fighting over. This is not one of them.
Right.
But I think this is why, like, if you think about anything, really, anything that a woman could do, whether it's your work life, how you dress, what you do with your body, how you present yourself, whether you have children, like literally any decision, and there's going to be shame attached to it somewhere. And it's horrible. And it's like, I don't know. I think for me, that's why it is so important, especially on my page and in my platform. Like, I don't care if people pose or not, if they don't show their cellulite or not, like if they prefer to, you know, rock their 6-pack abs, that's okay. But because I feel like there is a whole institution that is designed to make women feel ashamed of every single thing they do or they do not do. And like, as women, it is our jobs to really fight against that. And honestly, I believe in just like supporting each other, because all of this madness that is often, it frustrates me. It drives me crazy.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. I don't think my husband and his friends have that same ingrained sense of shame that we do, you know, like I don't hear him looking at himself in the mirror being like, you know, like
they're always like, I look so hot. I'm like, how do you guys always think you look hot?
Always. Like literally. I'm like, but no, you just ate that burrito. Like I'm trying to make him feel bad. And I'm like, wait, I shouldn't do that.
Yeah, I shouldn't do that.
But it's true. It's like men do not have that same programming. And I guess it just does go back to, you know, right from the beginning, like talking to these, the kids and like really supporting like what you're saying tonight too, like supporting women in general and not tearing each other down.
Because that's what my next point was going to be is like, I have this 50-50, right? Where I'm like, yes, I want to be for myself. I want to be self-love. I want to love all the bits and the bobs and the wrinkles and the cellulite. And I want to tell my audience to love it too, because I do believe that, right? But then there's 50% of me that also, wants to maybe get Botox one day. I don't know. Never done it before. Maybe might want to get a cream that makes me feel better about my legs. Maybe I do want to get a tummy tuck one day because of the big babies I had. I don't know. And then I think to myself, well, is that wrong? Because I'm also wanting to be more about self-love, or can they coexist where it's like, you know what, you can still get a breast lift if it makes you feel better and still have self-love, can it coexist?
Yeah.
It's a great topic. And I think it's a very complex one, but for me personally, 1000% they can coexist. I think of it like makeup, right? Like sometimes I will get people who slide into my DMs and are like, okay, but you talk about self-love, but I see you're wearing makeup. And I'm like, but that for me is not. Makeup makes me feel confident. It makes me feel strong. I do not need it. I don't need it all the time. But if I choose to wear it, that's incredible too. Like it is my decision and it is for me. And I feel like that is how I approach any of these things. Like the things you were just talking about, like if it is that individual's decision, and if, she is a grown adult, I feel it's very different if you are a 12-year-old little girl and you were like, okay, now I need my boobs done. Like that's a really different conversation in a very delicate space. But if you're a grown adult and you're like, maybe you're a mom, like you're saying, and you decide, okay, I want my tatas have changed and I would feel better to have them, boop. That's who am I to sit there and shame you and point fingers at you and say, well, you exist in a culture where so much of a female's worth is based around her body, but how dare you internalize that culture? But also if you don't do anything, you've let yourself go. So that's shameful too. Like, no, I believe empowerment looks and feels different on every woman. And as a grown adult, for me, feminism is really about the freedom to choose and having the education to understand and really look at your choices.
That's a great way to put it. That's a great
Sorry,
way.
I went on like a little, I feel
it's all about choice, right?
Yeah, it's all about, no, but that's such a good way to put it. It's like, you should have the choice and you should be able to do what makes you feel better, and being confident, whatever makes you feel confident, you're going to actually put that out into the world. So be that person, like that. And you're going to help so many more people by doing that. Right.
But then does that, what we were just talking about, like, yes, we can just say if you want to get your boobs done. Right. But then what about if you are taking a picture and you want to face tune your stomach in, and then you're putting that message out, but it makes you feel better? Maybe that's a different way to look at it, because then maybe you're making other people feel like that's the reality. I don't know. Like, is surgery and filters the same thing?
Oh, yeah.
You're putting fake boobs on, you're lifting your fake, you know what I mean? It's a hard one. It's all a hard conversation to have.
Oh, and it's complex. And I do think every person has to reach their own conclusions about it. I think my concern with filters, which I do use, sometimes I don't. Like today I did a picture where I even had like eye boogers, but like sometimes
sexy.
I know. I put it up and I was just like, all right,
it's the new thing. All of a sudden now everyone's got eye boogers.
Eye boogers, yeah.
Started a trend.
The Danae Mercer trend. Eye boogers is my legacy. But I think my main concern with filters isn't how dare you put that out into the world, you are shameful. It's, are you sure you feel okay when those filters go off? Because I think even as someone who is a content creator and I am on screen quite a lot, sometimes if I use filters again and again and again, if I switch it off and you're suddenly like, oh, wait a second. Ooh. And at the end of the day, we still need to feel okay and comfortable with what we see in the mirror, with what we're living with. And sometimes with apps, with things like Facetune, maybe you can distort your body to such an extent that like you can't even recreate that in real life. And so how do you mentally navigate that? And are you sure that's the best decision for you?
Interesting.
Yeah,
I agree.
Interesting. Yeah. And you're putting it out there. I mean, once it's out there, right? So if you're not being true, that's out there.
It's interesting because yes, I feel like the more filters, I don't ever use the filters that change my face, but those filters where it's like makes it a little sparkly or it makes your skin a little like more fresh. But then I look in the mirror and I'm like, oh my God, your skin is a disaster. Like, geez, I really need to get a facial. But no, it does. Like, if that's doing that to me and I'm not using the face altering apps, then what does it do to young girls who are so impressionable and their brains have not fully matured until they're, I think, at least 25? Their frontal lobe isn't fully developed. It can definitely go down the road of even suicidal thoughts because of the way you don't look. So yeah, I'm worried about I'm excited for the generation that's coming up, like our daughters, and I'm also nervous because I think they have a lot to navigate when it comes to that. But I also think that they've been given a lot more space to be themselves, and I'm so excited that the conversation now is about, gender and race equality and, being who you want to be and acceptance and self-love and what you're doing because you have your account. I think that also makes me feel like the world is a better place for my daughters to grow in now. So I thank you so much for your account and what you have done, because again, because of you, because of Sarah from Birds Papaya, those are the accounts that I follow. I unfollowed all the accounts that made me feel like shit, not because they were trying to make me feel like shit, but they did. And I'm not saying, you're a beautiful, beautiful woman, but you're also very honest and real and raw. And for people like Roxy and I, we go, oh, this is a safe place. So we thank you so much for that.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you. That means a lot. And I have just such a soft spot for moms because I think it's very nuanced and difficult, and a real soft spot for young girls growing up today. I think it's very harder than anything I would have grown up with. So that means a lot to hear you say that. Thank you.
And where can people find you? You've got lots. You've got a podcast, right? As well. Tell us where they can find you.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I have a podcast called Talking Out Loud, and I usually talk to experts like therapists, psychologists. I've had a couple relationship experts recently talk about sex, which is very powerful.
We need them on here, Roxy.
Oh, it's great. It's so interesting. It's like, because again, we don't talk about it. So I love that. So I've got a podcast called Talking Out Loud, and then my Instagram is just Danae Mercer with an E after the Danae Mercer. And yeah, that's probably the best way to find me.
And I guess you're going to stay in the Middle East for a while?
Stay tuned.
We might have an exclusive right here, everyone. Don't say we didn't give you nothing. And don't forget to rate, subscribe, and comment. And we are Women on Top Official on Instagram.
And Women on Top Podcast on Facebook.
And I am Danae Mercer.
And I am Roxy Manning.
And we are Women on Top.